If you think life is fair, then you have never met a boy like David. Because in the crowded streets of Lagos, where survival itself was a daily competition, David seemed to have been born on the losing side. Every morning before sunrise, while other children were still sleeping under their warm blankets, David was already awake. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. The small room he lived in was hardly a room at all. The zinc roof leaked whenever rain fell. The mattress he slept on was so thin that he could feel every stone beneath it. Yet every morning he would wake up with the same determination. Maybe today would be better. Maybe today somebody would see him differently. Maybe today people would stop treating him like he was invisible. Unfortunately, today would be worse. Far worse. David quickly wore his faded school uniform. The uniform had once been blue. Now it looked like a mixture of gray, brown, and hopelessness. His shoes were torn at the sides. His school bag had been stitched so many times that it looked more thread than fabric. Still, he smiled, because that was what his grandmother always told him. David, no matter how difficult life becomes, never allow anybody to steal your smile. His grandmother, Mama Grace, was the only family he knew. The only person who genuinely loved him. The only person who never made him feel like a burden. As he prepared to leave, Mama Grace handed him a small piece of bread. "Take this." David smiled. "What about you, Mama?" "I already ate." The old woman lied. Again, David knew she had not eaten. But he also knew arguing would change nothing. He accepted the bread and kissed her forehead. "I'll make you proud one day." Mama Grace smiled. "My son, you've already made me proud." David left. The narrow streets were already coming alive. Danfo buses blasted their horns. Street traders arranged their goods. Motorcycles zigzagged through traffic. Lagos was awake, and Lagos waited for nobody. David walked almost 40 minutes to school because he couldn't afford transportation. Along the way, people barely noticed him. To most people, he was just another poor boy, another face in a city of millions, another nobody. But hidden inside a small plastic bag in his school bag was something strange. A silver necklace. Old, expensive looking, with a symbol engraved on it. A crown. David had owned it for as long as he could remember. Mama Grace had always warned him, never lose it. Whenever he asked where it came from, she always changed the subject, as if the necklace carried secrets she wasn't ready to reveal. David didn't know it, but that necklace would soon change everything. At Royal Crest Secondary School, David's problems were waiting, as usual. The moment he entered the school compound, laughter followed him. Not friendly laughter, cruel laughter. The kind that cuts deeper than knives. Look who finally arrived. Prince Poverty, Minister of Broken Shoes. The insults came from a group of boys, led by Tunde. Tunde was rich. His father owned construction companies. His mother was famous in social circles. Everything about him screamed privilege. Everything about David screamed struggle. And Tunde loved reminding him of that difference. The boys surrounded David. Tunde pointed at David's shoes. The group exploded with laughter. "Guy, are those shoes or archaeological discoveries?" More laughter. David kept walking, ignoring them. That only made them angrier, because bullies hate being ignored. Tunde stepped in front of him. "Are you deaf?" David sighed. "No." "Then answer me. I don't have time." The surrounding students gasped. Nobody spoke to Tunde like that. Nobody. Tunde's smile disappeared. For a second. Then he laughed. Interesting. He grabbed David's school bag. The strap snapped instantly. Books scattered across the ground. Students laughed. Some recorded videos. Nobody helped. Nobody ever helped. David knelt and began picking up his books. Quietly, patiently, as if humiliation had become normal. Maybe it had. As he gathered his things, something fell from the torn bag. The silver necklace. It landed in the dust. Tunde picked it up. The sunlight reflected off the metal. His eyes widened. This thing actually looks expensive. David immediately stood. Give it back. The urgency in his voice surprised everyone. Tunde noticed too. Oh? He raised the necklace. So this matters to you? Give it back. The smile returned. An evil smile. The kind that meant trouble. Tunde tossed the necklace to one of his friends. The friend tossed it to another. Soon they were playing catch with it, laughing, mocking. David chased after it desperately. Stop. Nobody listened. The necklace flew from one hand to another. Then suddenly, snap. The chain broke. The pendant hit the ground. Silence. For a brief moment, David froze. Something inside him shattered. Not because it was expensive, not because it was beautiful, because it was all he had. The only thing connecting him to a past he didn't understand. He picked it up carefully. His hands trembled. Tunde rolled his eyes. It's just a necklace. David looked up. His eyes burned with anger. Real anger, the kind nobody had ever seen before. For a second, even Tunde felt uncomfortable. Then the bell rang. The moment ended. But something had changed. And nobody noticed. Except one person. The elderly security guard near the gate. A man named Musa. Because when the pendant hit the ground, Musa had seen the symbol clearly, the crown. And the moment he saw it, his face turned pale, very pale, as if he had just seen a ghost. The school day dragged on. Students attended lessons, teachers lectured, life continued. But David couldn't focus. His mind kept returning to the necklace, the broken necklace, the strange symbol, the questions. Questions that had followed him since childhood. Who were his parents? Why did nobody ever talk about them? Why did Mama Grace always avoid answering? Why did he feel different? Why did he sometimes dream about palaces, large gates, royal guards, golden halls, dreams that felt strangely real, as if they weren't dreams at all? At lunch break, he sat alone under a tree, as usual, while other students laughed and chatted. David ate nothing. The bread from morning was long gone. Hunger twisted inside his stomach. Then a shadow appeared. He looked up. It was Musa, the security guard. The old man looked nervous, extremely nervous. David. Yes, sir. Can I see that necklace? David frowned. Why? Musa hesitated for several seconds, then shook his head. Forget I asked. He turned to leave, but David stopped him. Sir. Musa looked back. You know something, don't you? The old man's face revealed more than his words. Fear, shock, recognition. Then he whispered something that would change David's life forever. Something nobody had ever told him. Something impossible. Something unbelievable. Something that sounded like madness. You remind me of someone. David blinked. Who? Musa swallowed, his voice barely audible. A prince. David stared at Musa. The old security guard's words hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. A prince. For a moment, David thought he had heard wrong. A prince? He repeated. Musa looked around nervously. The school compound was still busy. Students moved around. Teachers walked past. Nobody seemed to be paying attention. Yet Musa looked like a man carrying a dangerous secret. A prince, he said again quietly. David almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it sounded ridiculous. He looked down at his torn uniform, his dusty shoes, his empty lunch container. Everything about his life screamed poverty. How could anybody look at him and think of royalty? You must be mistaken, Musa sighed. I pray that I am. The old man sat beside him under the tree. His eyes remained fixed on the necklace. The symbol on that pendant. What about it? I have seen it before. David's heart skipped. Where? As though speaking might bring trouble. Then finally he answered. Many years ago. Where? In Ile Ode Kingdom. David frowned. I've never heard of it. Most people haven't. Musa nodded. It is one of the oldest royal kingdoms in southwestern Nigeria. David listened carefully. For the first time in years, someone seemed to know something about the mysterious necklace, something important. The royal family used that exact symbol. The crown? Yes. David looked down at the pendant. Suddenly, it seemed heavier, more important, more dangerous. But how do you know this? Musa leaned back. Because I used to work there. David's eyes widened. You worked in a palace? The old man nodded. Long ago. The afternoon breeze swept across the school grounds. David could barely breathe. Every answer seemed to create 10 more questions. If that's true, then why would I have this? Musa stared at him, his expression filled with concern. That is exactly what scares me. That evening, David could think about nothing else. Not homework, not school, not Tunde, not even hunger. Only the necklace, the crown, the kingdom, the prince. By the time he reached home, his mind felt like it would explode. Mama Grace sat outside peeling cassava. The old woman smiled when she saw him, but David didn't smile back. Immediately she noticed something was wrong. What happened? David sat beside her. Slowly, carefully. Mama. Who am I? The knife stopped moving. Just for a second, but David noticed. Every movement, every reaction, every tiny change. What kind of question is that? Please answer. You are my grandson. No. David shook his head. I mean before that. The old woman's smile faded. The silence that followed felt heavy. Dangerous. I met someone today. Mama Grace immediately became alert. Who? A security guard. The knife stopped again. He said something. What did he say? David pulled out the necklace. The old woman's face changed instantly. Fear. Pure fear. And that was all the confirmation David needed. You know something. No. You do. No. Mama, please. Her eyes filled with tears. For years she had avoided this moment, prayed against it, hidden from it. Now it had finally arrived. David's voice softened. Please. The old woman looked away. For several moments she said nothing. Then finally she whispered, I am not your grandmother. David froze. The world stopped. The sounds of the street disappeared. Everything vanished, leaving only those words. I am not your grandmother. What? Tears rolled down her cheeks. I found you. David stared at her. Found me? What do you mean? You were a baby. His heart pounded. A baby? Yes, you couldn't have been more than 1 year old. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Nothing made sense anymore. Nothing. Where did you find me? Mama Grace looked toward the horizon, as if she were looking into the past. It was raining. Her voice trembled, very heavily. 20 years earlier, the storm had been brutal. Roads flooded, trees bent under powerful winds. Mama Grace was younger then, still strong, still working. She had been returning from the market when she heard crying, a baby's cry, faint, desperate, coming from the bushes near an abandoned road. At first she ignored it, then she heard it again, louder. She followed the sound, and there, wrapped in expensive cloth, lay a baby boy, alone, abandoned, crying. Beside him was only one thing, a silver necklace, the same crown symbol, the same mystery. Mama Grace picked up the child, waited for someone to come. Nobody came. Waited another day. Still nobody came. Weeks passed, months passed. Nobody claimed him. Eventually she raised him as her own, and gave him a name, David. Back in the present, David sat frozen. His entire life had changed in a matter of minutes. You never told me. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Mama Grace looked directly into his eyes. The people who left you. David felt cold, very cold. What do you mean? They weren't ordinary people. The fear in her voice was genuine, real. As though she still feared them after all these years. They were powerful. David's stomach tightened. Who were they? I don't know. The old woman shook her head, but I knew enough to stay silent. David looked down at the necklace. His hands trembled. Every answer created new mysteries. Every mystery felt bigger than the last. Then suddenly another thought struck him. What if Musa is right? Mama Grace's eyes widened. What? What if this necklace really belongs to a royal family? The old woman didn't answer, because deep down she had wondered the same thing for 20 years. The next morning, David arrived at school earlier than usual. He found Musa sweeping near the gate. The old man immediately knew something had happened. You spoke to her. David nodded. What did she say? David told him everything. Every detail. Every revelation. By the time he finished, Musa looked pale. Very pale. It cannot be. What? Musa lowered his voice. There was a story. What story? A story everyone in Ile-Ode Kingdom tried to forget. David moved closer, his pulse racing. What story? Musa looked around, then finally spoke. About a missing prince. The words hit David like lightning. A prince? Musa nodded slowly. 20 years ago. David listened carefully. Every muscle in his body tense. The king had only one son. What happened? The old man swallowed. No one knows. How? One night the child disappeared. David's breathing became shallow. The prince vanished. What do you mean vanished? Just disappeared. Musa shook his head. The palace searched everywhere. The police searched. Villages searched. The entire kingdom searched. Nothing. The child was gone. Completely gone. David felt goosebumps spreading across his skin. Then what happened? The king never recovered. Musa's voice grew sad. He spent years searching. Years, but the prince was never found. David stared at him. The pieces were beginning to fit. And that terrified him. No, he shook his head. Unfortunately, someone else had been listening. Tunde. He had arrived early, and overheard enough to find the entire conversation hilarious. By lunchtime, the whole school knew. David the poor boy, David the orphan, David the nobody, was claiming to be a prince. Students laughed non-stop. The story spread faster than wildfire. By afternoon, people were bowing sarcastically whenever David walked past. Your Highness. Good afternoon, Prince of Poverty. Please don't forget us when you become king. Laughter erupted everywhere. David tried ignoring them, but it hurt. It hurt badly. Especially because he wasn't claiming anything. He was simply searching for answers. Tunde, however, saw an opportunity. And bullies love opportunities. During final break, he stood on a table in the cafeteria. Attention, everybody. The room became quiet. I have an important announcement. The students laughed already. Apparently, our dear David is not poor. More laughter. He is actually royalty. The cafeteria exploded. Some students nearly fell from their chairs laughing. Others recorded videos. Tunde bowed dramatically. Your Majesty. The crowd joined in. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. David clenched his fists. Humiliation burned inside him. But before he could react, a voice interrupted. A female voice. Strong. Confident. That's enough. The room fell silent. Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance was a girl nobody expected. A beautiful girl wearing an expensive school uniform. New student. Recently transferred. Quiet. Observant. Her name was Zara. And for the first time since arriving at Royal Crest Secondary School, someone had just defended David. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to True Life Diaries. And tell me in the comments, do you think David is really the missing prince, or is there an even bigger secret hiding behind that mysterious necklace? Trust me, the truth is far more shocking than anyone can imagine. Now, let's continue this incredible story. The cafeteria remained silent. Nobody expected anyone to defend David, especially not Zara. Tunde stared at her in disbelief. The rich boy was used to people agreeing with him, laughing with him, following him, not challenging him. Certainly not in front of the entire school. Zara folded her arms. Her expression remained calm, confident, unbothered. I said that's enough. Tunde laughed, a fake laugh, the kind people use when they are embarrassed. And who asked for your opinion? Nobody, Zara replied. But bullying someone because he's poor is pathetic. A loud gasp swept across the cafeteria. Some students exchanged shocked looks. Others immediately pulled out their phones. This was getting interesting. Tunde jumped down from the table. You don't know what you're talking about. No, Zara nodded. I know exactly what I'm talking about. For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension was so thick that students could almost touch it. Then, Tunde smiled, a dangerous smile. Careful, Zara smiled back. Or what? The room exploded. Students could hardly believe what they were seeing. Nobody spoke to Tunde like this. Nobody, especially not a new student. Tunde's face darkened. He stepped closer. But before things could escalate, a teacher entered the cafeteria. Immediately, everyone scattered. The show was over. For now. As students rushed out, Zara walked past David. Then she stopped. Only for a second. And whispered something strange. Meet me after school. David frowned. Before he could ask why, she was already gone. The entire afternoon felt endless. David couldn't focus. Not on mathematics, not on English, not on chemistry. His mind remained fixed on one thing. Zara. Why did she defend him? Why did she want to meet him? And why did she seem so interested in the necklace? Students rushed out like prisoners escaping freedom. David waited near the football field. The sun was beginning to set. Orange light covered the school grounds. 10 minutes passed, then Zara appeared. She wasn't alone. A black SUV waited outside the school gate. Expensive. Very expensive. The kind of vehicle David only saw in movies. Zara noticed him staring. My driver. David nodded. Of course. Everything about her suggested wealth. The confidence, the clothes, the expensive phone. The luxury vehicle. She belonged to a completely different world. Yet somehow she had defended him. Why did you want to see me? Zara looked around first, making sure nobody was listening. Then she spoke. Tell me about the necklace. David's heart skipped. Again. Everybody suddenly seemed interested in the necklace. Musa, Mama Grace, and now Zara. What about it? I saw it yesterday. So? Zara sighed. You don't know what it means, do you? David immediately became alert. What do you know? For a moment she hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then she surprised him. My father works with royal families. David blinked. What? He advises traditional rulers. Now David was even more confused. What does that have to do with me? Zara looked directly at the pendant hanging from his neck. Everything. The breeze seemed to stop. The world felt suddenly quiet. My father showed me that symbol years ago. You've seen it before? Yes. Where? In a royal archive. David could barely breathe. Every day seemed to uncover another layer of mystery. Another secret. Another clue. The crown belongs to Eo-Ode Kingdom. David swallowed. The same kingdom Musa had mentioned. The same kingdom connected to the missing prince. The same kingdom connected to his necklace. This could no longer be coincidence. It was impossible. How do you know? My father collects historical records. And there was a file. David leaned forward. A file? About a missing royal child. His heart nearly stopped. The words felt unreal. Like a dream. Or a movie. Not real life. Not his life. Yet here they were. Repeated again. Missing royal child. Missing prince. Missing heir. Every road seemed to lead to the same destination, and David wasn't sure he wanted to arrive there. That night he barely slept. Questions filled his mind. Thousands of them. What if Musa was right? What if Zara was right? What if Mama Grace's fears were justified? What if he really wasn't ordinary? Then, who was he? At midnight, he finally sat up. Sweat covered his forehead. The dream had returned. The same dream, Again. Only this time it was clearer. Much clearer. He saw a palace. Massive gates. Guards wearing traditional royal attire. Golden decorations. Beautiful gardens. Then he saw a woman. Elegant. Beautiful. Wearing royal clothing. She was holding him. A baby. Her baby. Tears filled her eyes. She looked terrified, as if danger was approaching. Then another figure appeared. A man. Tall. Powerful. Wearing a crown. The king. The woman handed the baby to someone. A servant. Then shouted something, but the words were impossible to hear. The dream began fading. Everything blurred. Then suddenly, David woke up, his heart pounding violently. The room was dark. Silent. Yet the emotions felt real. Too real. He touched his face. Tears. Actual tears. Why was he crying? Why did the dream feel like a memory? Not imagination. Not fantasy. A memory. The next day brought unexpected trouble. Tunde wasn't finished. Far from it. The rumors had spread beyond school. Students from neighboring schools were now discussing the missing prince. Social media videos mocked David non-stop. Some clips had thousands of views. One video showed students bowing before him while laughing hysterically. The comments were brutal. Prince of broken shoes, future king of poverty, royal beggar. The humiliation felt endless, but Tunde wanted more. During assembly, he launched his biggest attack yet. As students gathered, Tunde suddenly walked onto the stage. Without permission, without invitation. The teachers looked confused. The students looked excited. Everybody sensed drama. Tunde grabbed a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, laughter immediately followed. He pointed toward David. Today I would like us all to welcome royalty. The crowd erupted. Students laughed uncontrollably. Some nearly collapsed. Others filmed everything. David felt his face burn. But Tunde wasn't finished. He waved dramatically. Please rise for His Royal Highness. More laughter. Then something unexpected happened. Very unexpected. The principal stood. Everyone became quiet. The principal wasn't smiling. Not even slightly. He walked toward the stage. Slowly, deliberately, dangerously. Tunde suddenly looked nervous. The principal took the microphone. Get down. The two words carried enough authority to silence hundreds of students. Tunde obeyed. The principal looked around, his expression cold, disappointed, angry. What happened to this school? Nobody answered. Since when did bullying become entertainment? Silence. What kind of leaders are we producing? Students lowered their heads. The principal continued. Whether David is rich or poor is irrelevant. He pointed toward the crowd. What matters is character. The words landed heavily, especially on Tunde, especially on his friends. For once, nobody laughed. Nobody mocked. Nobody joked. The assembly ended in silence. Yet something important had happened. For the first time, an adult had publicly defended David, and that changed everything. Unfortunately, bigger problems were already approaching. Far away, hundreds of kilometers away, inside the ancient kingdom of Ode, a meeting was taking place. A very important meeting. Inside a magnificent palace, decorated with centuries of history, royal guards stood watch. Chiefs sat around a large table. The atmosphere was tense, heavy, uncomfortable. At the head of the table sat an elderly king, King Adewale, the ruler of Ode Kingdom. His face carried years of sorrow, years of pain, years of regret. Because 20 years earlier, he had lost something precious, his only son, his only heir, and despite decades of searching, the wound had never healed. One of the chiefs stepped forward. Your Majesty. The king nodded. What is it? The chief appeared uneasy. There is something you need to see. He handed over a tablet. The king frowned, then looked at the screen. A social media video played, students laughing, mocking, bullying. Then suddenly the camera zoomed in on David. Specifically, the necklace. The king froze. His hands trembled. The tablet nearly slipped from his fingers. No. The room became silent. The chiefs exchanged worried glances. The king stared at the screen, unable to breathe, unable to blink, unable to think, because around the neck of a bullied schoolboy in Lagos hung a necklace he knew better than anyone, a necklace that had disappeared 20 years ago, a necklace that belonged only to one person, the missing prince. The king slowly stood. Tears filled his eyes. His voice trembled. "Find him." The chiefs looked shocked. "Your Majesty, find him." His voice grew stronger, more desperate, more emotional. "Find that boy, immediately." Because after 20 years, for the first time, the kingdom had finally found a clue. And somewhere in Lagos, David had no idea that powerful people were already searching for him. The moment King Adewale gave the order, the atmosphere inside the royal palace changed completely. The chiefs looked at one another. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For 20 years they had watched the king suffer. For 20 years they had watched him search. For 20 years they had watched hope slowly die. And now? One video, one necklace, one poor boy in Lagos, and suddenly hope was alive again. The king's voice trembled. "Find him." "Yes, Your Majesty." Within minutes, calls were being made. Private investigators were contacted. Royal security teams received instructions. Old records were reopened. For the first time in 2 decades, the search for the missing prince had begun again, and this time, the trail was leading somewhere. Meanwhile, in Lagos, David's life was becoming more complicated. The principal's speech had reduced the bullying, but it hadn't stopped it. Not completely. Bullies rarely change overnight, especially bullies like Tunde. As classes ended that afternoon, David walked toward the gate. He planned to head home immediately. Instead, he found Tunde waiting, leaning against a car, smiling. That smile immediately made David uncomfortable. Because whenever Tunde smiled like that, trouble followed. "Going somewhere, Your Highness?" David sighed. "What do you want?" Tunde laughed. "You know?" He stepped closer. "I've been thinking." David remained silent. What if you're actually telling the truth? The statement surprised him. For weeks, Tunde had mocked the idea. Now suddenly he sounded curious. "What are you talking about?" Tunde shrugged. "I'm just saying." His eyes narrowed. "Maybe there really is something strange about you." David noticed it immediately. The tone, the expression. Something had changed. Tunde no longer looked amused. He looked suspicious. And suspicion was far more dangerous, because mockery creates embarrassment. Suspicion creates investigation. "Leave me alone." David walked away. But Tunde wasn't finished, not even close. Because the previous night his father had seen the viral videos. And unlike everyone else, his father had recognized the necklace. 3 nights earlier, inside an expensive mansion in Victoria Island, Chief Bamidele sat in his private office, one of the richest businessmen in Nigeria. Powerful, connected, respected, and deeply feared. The television played quietly in the background. A news segment discussing viral social media trends. Suddenly, David's video appeared. Students laughing, mocking, bullying. Chief Bamidele barely paid attention. Then he saw the necklace. Everything changed. The remote control fell from his hand. His face lost color. "No." The word escaped before he could stop it. He moved closer to the screen. Heart racing, sweat appearing on his forehead. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yet there it was. The crown symbol. The exact necklace. The same necklace from 20 years ago. The same necklace connected to a secret nobody was supposed to know. A secret buried long ago. Or so he thought. Chief Bamidele immediately picked up his phone. "Get me every piece of information on that boy." His voice shook. Not with fear, with panic. Real panic. Because if David was who he suspected, then everything was about to change. The next morning, David noticed something strange. A black vehicle parked near the school. The engine remained running, and the same vehicle appeared again after school. Then again the following day. David tried convincing himself it was coincidence. But deep down he knew better. Someone was watching him. The feeling grew stronger every day. By Friday evening he could no longer ignore it, especially when the vehicle followed him halfway home. Fear settled inside his chest. Who were they? What did they want? And why were they interested in him? That night, another shocking discovery happened. David returned home to find Mama Grace searching through an old wooden box. The moment she saw him, she quickly tried closing it. Too late. David had already noticed. "What is that?" David asked. "Nothing," Mama Grace replied. "Mama, nothing important." David walked closer, slowly, carefully. For years she had hidden things, avoided questions, changed subjects, but not tonight. Not anymore. "Mama, please," the old woman stared at him. The sigh of someone carrying a burden for too long. She opened the box. Inside were old documents, old photographs, old newspaper clippings, and one small envelope. David picked up a photograph. His eyes widened. A palace, the exact palace from his dreams. His hands began shaking. "How do you have this?" Mama Grace looked exhausted. "Because I have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For this day." David sat down, confused, terrified, desperate for answers. The old woman picked up the envelope. "I wanted to tell you years ago." Her voice broke, "but I was afraid." "What is it?" She handed it over. David opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, written 20 years earlier. The handwriting looked rushed, desperate, panicked. He began reading, and with every sentence his heart beat faster, much faster. The letter read, "If anything happens to us, protect the child. Never reveal his identity until it is safe. There are powerful people who want him dead. Trust nobody. Protect the necklace. One day the truth will return, and when it does, the kingdom will meet its prince." David stopped breathing. The room became silent. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He looked at Mama Grace. "What is this?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "The letter found with you." David felt dizzy, like the ground had disappeared beneath him. The kingdom, the prince, the necklace, the danger. Everything connected, everything. For the first time in his life, he began believing it. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible was true. Unfortunately, danger was already moving closer, much closer. That same night, a group of men sat inside a luxury office in Lagos. The office belonged to Chief Bamidele. Nobody smiled. Nobody relaxed. The atmosphere felt tense. One of the men placed a file on the table. "We found him." Chief Bamidele looked up. "You're sure?" "Yes." The man nodded. "His name is David." The chief's jaw tightened. "Age?" 19. Another nod. Exactly the right age. The room became quiet. One of the men finally asked the question nobody wanted to ask. "What if he really is the prince?" Chief Bamidele's expression darkened, dangerously. "He isn't." "But sir, secrets powerful enough to destroy lives. Powerful enough to destroy reputations. Powerful enough to destroy empires." The chief slowly stood, his eyes cold, calculating, determined. "Before the palace reaches him," he paused. "Bring him to me." The room fell silent. Everyone understood exactly what he meant, and nobody dared question him. The following Monday began normally, or so David thought. Students attended classes, teachers taught lessons, life appeared ordinary, until lunchtime. David sat under his usual tree, reading, trying to escape the chaos surrounding his life. Then Zara arrived, and one look at her face told him something was wrong, very wrong. She sat beside him, immediately, urgently. "David, what happened?" Her voice dropped. "My father found something." David's stomach tightened. "What?" Making sure nobody could hear. Then she whispered, "The royal archives." David's pulse accelerated. "What about them?" "There are photographs." His heart skipped. "Photographs?" "Of the missing prince. The world suddenly felt very quiet, very still. Zara swallowed, then said the words that changed everything. "You look exactly like him." David froze, completely froze. No movement, no words, no breathing, nothing. Zara continued, "The resemblance is unbelievable." His vision blurred. The impossible was becoming harder to deny. Every clue, every secret, every discovery, all pointing in the same direction. The same terrifying direction. Then suddenly, a loud screech interrupted them. Tires, outside the school gate. Students turned, teachers turned, everyone turned. 3 black SUVs had just entered the compound. Fast, aggressively. The vehicles stopped abruptly. Doors flew open. Several men stepped out, wearing dark suits, moving with purpose, moving with urgency, moving toward one person. David. And the moment he saw them, he knew. His life was about to change forever. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure you like this video, subscribe to True Life Diaries, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And tell me in the comments, who do you think sent the men in the black SUVs? The king, Chief Bamidele, or someone even more dangerous? Because now, the truth behind the missing prince begins to surface, and David's enemies finally make their move. The entire school compound froze. Students stopped talking. Teachers stopped moving. Even the security guards looked confused. 3 black SUVs stood near the entrance, their engines still running. Dust slowly settled around them, and from those vehicles emerged men who looked like they had come for serious business. Nobody smiled, nobody spoke. They moved with purpose, straight toward David. Zara immediately stood up, her eyes narrowed. This is not good. David's heartbeat accelerated. The same feeling returned, the feeling that someone had been watching him, following him, waiting, and now they had finally arrived. The men approached quickly. One of them stepped forward, tall, muscular, dark sunglasses, serious expression. "Are you David?" The question sounded simple, but something about it felt dangerous. Very dangerous. David hesitated. Before he could answer, another voice interrupted. "Who wants to know?" It was Zara. The man looked at her, then back at David. "We need to speak with him." "About what?" The man ignored her question. Instead, he reached into his jacket. Several students gasped. Teachers became alert. For a moment, everyone thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, he produced an identification card. He held it up. "We represent the Royal Council of Ile-Ode Kingdom." The entire school became silent. Dead silent. David felt his knees weaken. The Royal Council, the kingdom, the missing prince, everything was becoming real. The man continued, "The king wishes to meet you." Whispers immediately erupted across the compound. Students exchanged shocked looks. Teachers stared. Some people thought it was a joke. Others thought it was a movie scene. But David knew better. This was real, very real, and it terrified him. The principal quickly escorted everyone to his office. David, Zara, the royal representatives, and several senior staff members. Inside the office, tension filled the air. "Can someone explain exactly what is happening?" The leader of the royal team nodded respectfully. "Your principal deserves answers." Then he turned toward David. His expression softened, for the first time. "You may not understand this now." He paused. "But there is reason to believe you are connected to our royal family." The room became silent again. David swallowed. Hard. Connected? Or something more? "The king has searched for his son for 20 years. David's stomach twisted. 20 years. His age. The same age. The same timeline. The same mystery. Nothing about this felt like coincidence anymore. The principal looked stunned. "Are you saying?" "We are saying there are questions that need answers." The royal representative carefully chose his words, but everyone understood what he meant, especially David. Then another question entered his mind. "If the king is looking for me, He looked directly at the man. Then who else is looking for me? The room suddenly became uncomfortable. The representative exchanged glances with his colleagues, and that told David everything. There were others, dangerous others, people who didn't want him found. Across Lagos, Chief Bamidele received the news and exploded with rage. What do you mean they reached him first? The terrified man standing before him could barely speak. Sir. The chief slammed his hand onto the desk, hard enough to shake everything on it. Answer me. They arrived at the school this afternoon. Chief Bamidele cursed loudly. For years he had believed the problem was buried, gone forever, finished. Now everything was collapsing. The boy had been found. The king was involved. And worst of all, old secrets were beginning to wake up. The businessman walked toward the window, his face dark, his mind racing. 20 years earlier he had helped protect a lie, a very expensive lie, a very dangerous lie. And if David discovered the truth, everything could be destroyed. Not just reputations, not just careers, lives, entire lives. He slowly turned around. Prepare the jet. The jet, sir? Yes. Chief Bamidele's eyes hardened. If this boy is truly alive, he paused. I need to know exactly what he remembers. That evening, David returned home with more questions than answers. Mama Grace listened carefully as he explained everything. The royal representatives, the king, the invitation, the possibility. The old woman's eyes filled with emotion. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Yet now that it had arrived, none of them were. What should I do? David asked quietly. Mama Grace stared at him. The little boy she had raised. The little boy she had protected. The little boy she loved like her own son. Now standing at the edge of a truth bigger than either of them. Finally, she smiled sadly. You must go. David looked down. What if everything changes? It will. The answer came immediately. Honest, painful, certain. What if I don't belong here anymore? Mama Grace reached for his hand. You will always belong here. Tears filled David's eyes. Because deep down, that was his greatest fear. Not being poor, not being bullied, not being rejected. Losing the only family he had ever known. 2 days later, the journey began. For the first time in his life, David boarded a private aircraft. The experience felt unreal. The seats, the service, the luxury. Everything seemed like another world, a world that belonged to other people, not him. Yet somehow he was sitting inside it. Beside him sat Zara and her father. Across from them sat the royal representatives. Nobody spoke much. The atmosphere remained tense, heavy, because everyone understood what awaited them. Answers, life-changing answers. As the aircraft climbed into the clouds, David looked through the window. His reflection stared back. And for the first time, he truly wondered, who am I? Several hours later, they arrived in Ilode Kingdom. The moment David stepped out of the vehicle, he felt something strange, a feeling he couldn't explain. A feeling of familiarity. The roads, the buildings, the landscape. Everything felt oddly familiar, like somewhere he had visited long ago. Yet he knew he had never been there before. At least, he thought he hadn't. The royal convoy moved through the city. People lined the streets, watching, curious, whispering. The kingdom believed a miracle was happening. The missing prince might have returned. David wasn't sure whether to feel excited or terrified, maybe both. Then finally, the palace appeared. Massive, magnificent, beautiful. And the moment David saw it, his heart nearly stopped, because he recognized it. Immediately, the gates, the walls, the gardens, every detail, exactly like his dreams, exactly. David froze. The vehicle stopped. What is it? David couldn't answer, because tears had already begun forming in his eyes. The palace wasn't unfamiliar. It wasn't strange. It wasn't new. Somehow, it felt like home. Inside the palace, King Adewale waited, nervously. The old king looked older than his years. 20 years of grief had carved deep lines across his face. 20 years of regret had weighed heavily on his shoulders. Today, everything might change, or everything might collapse. A chief entered. "Your Majesty." The king stood immediately. "He's here?" The chief nodded. The king's hands trembled. For a ruler who commanded thousands, for a man feared and respected across the nation, this moment reduced him to something simpler. A father. Just a father. Waiting to see his child, perhaps for the first time in 20 years. The doors slowly opened. David entered, and the world seemed to stop. The king stared. David stared. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The resemblance was undeniable. The eyes, the face, the posture, the features. It was like looking at a younger version of the king himself. The room became silent. Even the chiefs looked emotional. Then something extraordinary happened. A memory flashed through David's mind. Not a dream, not imagination. A memory, real. He saw the same man, younger, holding him, laughing, calling him by a name he had forgotten, a name buried deep inside his mind. Without thinking, without understanding why, "Father," the king froze. Tears immediately filled his eyes. The room gasped. Nobody had told David what to say. Nobody had suggested it. The word came from somewhere deeper, somewhere hidden, somewhere real. The king staggered backward, overcome with emotion. "My son." Tears rolled down his face. For 20 years, he had dreamed of hearing those words again. Now they had finally returned. Yet, before anyone could celebrate, a voice echoed through the hall. Cold, sharp, dangerous. "Stop this nonsense." Everyone turned. The palace doors swung open, and standing there was Chief Bamidele, surrounded by armed men, his expression dark, his eyes fixed on David. The atmosphere changed instantly. Danger had arrived. Real danger, and the shocking truth behind the missing prince was finally about to be revealed. The grand palace hall fell into complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. All eyes were fixed on Chief Bamidele. The powerful businessman stood at the entrance surrounded by armed guards. His face was hard, cold, determined. For a brief moment, even the king looked shocked. Not because Bamidele had arrived, but because he had arrived at the exact moment the truth was beginning to emerge. The elderly king slowly stepped forward. His voice carried authority. The authority of a ruler. "What is the meaning of this?" Chief Bamidele smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No disrespect, Your Majesty." His eyes shifted toward David. "But this charade has gone on long enough." The room became tense. The chiefs exchanged nervous glances. David stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had no idea what was about to happen. But every instinct told him it would change everything. Bamidele pointed directly at him. "That boy is not the prince." Gasps erupted throughout the hall. The king's face darkened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone is trying to deceive the kingdom." The businessman stepped forward confidently. "As painful as it is, Your Majesty, grief can make people believe impossible things." The king stared at him. "And you know this how?" Bamidele's smile widened. "Because I know the truth." The atmosphere immediately changed. Even David felt it. Something dangerous was hiding beneath the surface, and everyone could sense it. The king folded his arms. "Then speak." Bamidele nodded, slowly, carefully, as though preparing for a battle. "The prince died 20 years ago." The words echoed through the hall. Shock swept across the room. Some chiefs immediately looked uncomfortable. Others lowered their heads. The king's expression hardened. "You dare say that?" "I'm saying what nobody else has the courage to say." Bamidele's voice grew stronger. "The prince disappeared. Years passed. No evidence. No witnesses. No child." The businessman looked directly at David. "And suddenly a poor boy appears, with a necklace. His voice dripped with sarcasm. And everyone wants to believe a miracle happened. Murmurs spread throughout the palace. Some people looked uncertain. Others looked angry. Then David spoke. For the first time, I never claimed to be a prince. The room turned toward him. David swallowed. I never asked for any of this. His voice shook slightly. But every answer leads back here. The businessman laughed. A coincidence. No. David shook his head. The necklace, the dreams, the letter, the photographs, the resemblance. One by one he listed the clues that had changed his life, the clues that had brought him to the palace, the clues nobody could explain away. Bamidele's smile began fading, because deep down he knew David was getting closer. Closer than anyone had ever been. Then Zara's father stood, a respected historian and royal advisor, quiet, intelligent, careful with words, until now. Your Majesty. The king nodded. What is it? The man opened a leather folder. Inside were old documents, ancient records, photographs, evidence, years of research, years of hidden truths. I believe it is time. The room became silent. The advisor slowly removed a photograph. Then another. Then another. He placed them on the table. Every face in the room leaned forward. The first photograph showed the king holding a baby. The second showed the queen carrying the same child. The third showed the child wearing a silver necklace. The exact necklace. David's necklace. The room exploded with whispers. The resemblance was undeniable, even as a baby. The eyes, the features. The birthmark near his left shoulder. Everything matched. Everything. Bamidele suddenly looked nervous. Very nervous. And David noticed. For the first time, the businessman wasn't acting confident anymore. He was acting afraid. Then came the moment that changed everything. The advisor reached into the folder one final time and produced a sealed document. The royal seal remained intact, untouched for 20 years. The king frowned. What is that? The advisor swallowed. His voice trembled. The queen's final statement. The room gasped. Even the king looked stunned, because nobody had seen that document before. Nobody. The advisor carefully opened it, then began reading. The words echoed throughout the palace. If this message is ever found, then something has gone terribly wrong. The room became silent. The queen's voice seemed alive through the letter. I fear there are people inside our circle who wish to seize power. Chief Bamidele's face immediately tightened. The advisor continued. I do not know whom to trust. The king looked shocked. Several chiefs looked terrified. The advisor read on. If anything happens to me, protect my son. My child must survive, even if he must disappear. The room became completely still. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence nobody expected. The sentence that shattered 20 years of lies. The man I fear most is Chief Bamidele. The palace exploded. Gasps, shouts, shock, disbelief, chaos. Every eye turned toward the businessman. Every single eye. Chief Bamidele's face turned pale. The king stared at him in horror. No. The old ruler's voice trembled. No. Bamidele stepped backward. One step, then another, then another. And suddenly everyone knew. The truth. The terrible truth. 20 years earlier, Chief Bamidele had wanted power, more power. The kingdom was wealthy, influential, important, and the prince stood between him and his ambitions. The queen discovered the conspiracy, discovered the betrayal, discovered everything. So she acted first, to save her child. The baby prince was secretly removed from the palace, placed in the care of trusted people, hidden, protected. But before the plan could be completed, the queen died under mysterious circumstances. The kingdom descended into confusion. The prince disappeared, and Bamidele spent 20 years making sure nobody found him. Until now. The king looked devastated. His entire body shook. Tears filled his eyes. You, his voice broke. You did this? Bamidele remained silent. The silence itself was an answer. The king staggered backward. 20 years. 20 years of grief. 20 years of searching. 20 years of suffering. All because of one man's greed. The old king pointed toward him. Arrest him. Immediately royal guards moved. Bamidele panicked. No. He turned toward the exit, but it was too late. The guards surrounded him instantly. His men dropped their weapons. The fight was over before it began. 20 years of lies had finally collapsed. Hours later, the palace felt different. Lighter, peaceful, as if a storm had finally ended. The chiefs gathered in the royal courtyard. The king sat quietly. Beside him sat David. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, the king broke the silence. I missed your entire childhood. David looked down. The words hurt. Not because he blamed the king, because they were true. Birthdays, school, growing up, life. 20 years gone, never to return. I cannot change the past. No. David nodded. You can't. The honesty surprised everyone. Then David smiled. But maybe we can start with today. The king looked at him, hope slowly appearing in his eyes. For the first time in decades. Hope. Real hope. Then the old ruler embraced him, and the kingdom erupted into applause. The missing prince had finally come home. News spread across Nigeria within hours. Television stations covered the story. Newspapers published headlines. Social media exploded. The bullied boy, the orphan, the poor student, the forgotten child, was actually a missing prince. The story sounded unbelievable, yet it was true, completely true. And nowhere was the reaction stronger than Royal Crest Secondary School. Students stared at their phones in disbelief. Teachers could hardly believe it. The same boy he had mocked, the same boy he had humiliated, the same boy he had called Prince of Poverty, was actually a real prince, a real one. For several minutes he simply sat there, speechless, ashamed, embarrassed, and for the first time in his life, Tunde understood what it felt like to be humbled. A week later, David returned to the school, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Students gathered everywhere, whispering, watching, staring. The atmosphere felt completely different. People who once ignored him now wanted photographs. People who once mocked him now wanted conversations. People who once laughed now wanted friendship. David noticed everything and understood everything. But he remained the same humble boy, the same kind heart, the same person, because Mama Grace had taught him something important. Character matters more than status. The principal welcomed him warmly. Teachers applauded. Students cheered. Then, unexpectedly, Tunde approached. Slowly, nervously. The entire school watched. Nobody knew what would happen. Tunde stopped in front of David, then lowered his head. I'm sorry. The crowd became silent. David stared at him. The apology sounded genuine, real, not forced, not fake. Tunde continued, I was cruel. I was selfish. And I was wrong. David remained quiet for a moment, then smiled, and extended his hand. I forgive you. The entire school erupted into applause, not because a prince had forgiven someone, because a good person had. Months later, a grand ceremony took place in Iliode Kingdom. Thousands attended, traditional dancers performed, drummers filled the air with music, chiefs gathered from across the nation, and standing before them all was David, no longer a mystery, no longer a bullied boy, no longer a missing child. Prince David Adewale, the rightful heir, the future king. As the crown was placed upon his head, he thought about everything. The tiny room, the torn shoes, the bullying, the loneliness, the pain, every difficult moment, every painful memory, every obstacle, and suddenly he understood something. The hardships hadn't destroyed him. They had prepared him to lead, prepared him to understand ordinary people, prepared him to become a different kind of ruler, a better one. And as thousands cheered around him, David smiled. Not because he had found a kingdom, because he had finally found himself. The end. What an incredible journey. From a bullied schoolboy in Lagos to the rightful prince of an ancient kingdom, David's story reminds us that you should never judge someone by their appearance, their clothes, or their circumstances, because sometimes the person everyone looks down on is carrying a destiny bigger than anyone can imagine. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to True Life Diaries for more powerful, life-changing stories. And tell me in the comments, if you were David, would you forgive the people who bullied you? Until next time, stay blessed, stay inspired, and remember, your story is not over yet.